Well, it might take a couple of minutes to get everybody in here. How's everybody like the fact that it's not 4 degrees outside for a change? Yeah, isn't that nice? I just took my dog for a walk. 52 degrees here right now.
Is your back feeling better then?
Slightly. I ended up in the ER on Friday
Oh my God.
and got a shot in my hip and prescription for some steroids, which have helped a little bit, but it's going to be a while before this goes away, I think.
Mhm.
At least I can sit without, feeling like I'm going to die. Laying down
Yeah.
is the worst part. That's the problem. And that's what sucks because you go to bed and you can't sleep, because it's the most uncomfortable position to be in. All right. Still got a couple we're waiting on here for just a second. Get that weird time of day where I've got this massive blast of sunlight coming in my window. And I got to be careful not to rock back too far. All right.
Got a ring light, and I'm like, yes,
Ah,
so happy because I've been using it for I needed to use it for self taping, but I was like, I can use it for photography. Yes.
so does it fit around your lens or it
Yeah.
does?
So yeah. So well, not it. So like camera.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, gotcha.
But I can handheld it.
Yeah, those things are pretty interesting. I'm not a fan of them for like portrait work because I think it creates a real unnatural look in the eyes, but they still create a pretty unusual effect. And it's nice to have that extra little movable light that you can put everywhere. Where did you get that?
Amazon.
Amazon? How much did you pay? You want to tell everybody?
Like $8, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a pretty inexpensive way to add a little light that you can play with. That's a real smart idea. All right, let's look down my list here. Okay, there we are. Just trying to figure out who we're missing a couple. And I don't want to uncredit somebody for not being here. Caleb. Yep. Hannah. 2. Oh, we just lost somebody. All right, looks like everybody else is there. We're missing 4. We're missing 3, and somebody just bugged out on us. I think maybe it was just a bump off. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so obviously we'll start looking at the stuff you guys sent in, which some of you have to help me out a little bit. Some of them are marked, with what they are, and some of them aren't. And some of the ones that aren't are not that obvious. So you'll kind of have to help me out with what they are. But let's take a look at all of those images. There are a couple good ones in there. All right. And I think we lost Liz. So I'm going to skip hers because I'm not sure what I don't think it was for this assignment. She had missed a couple of assignments and submitted, and I kind of kind of not sure what these are. So I'll have to wait until she, hopefully, I think she's the one that got bumped out. Hopefully till she comes back in. Savannah's coming in. Okay. All right. So let's go on to Hannah. We'll start with Hannah. Trying to get a spot where I can make these windows work. Give me a second. Okay. So Hannah, yours are not marked. And so you'll have to help me. I think a couple of them I can figure out, but the rest I'm not sure. So which of the compositional elements is this one?
That's balance. That's what that one is.
Okay, so what are you balancing against each other? What are the two balancing elements here?
So there's stairs like that are in my backyard. And they kind of just go in a straight line. Or no, the balance one is, I don't know, which one's the one where there's like a straight line at? I can't remember.
Well, I've got,
Because that's what the top one is.
so this one I would have considered leading lines using
Yeah,
the
that's
staircase.
what I meant.
Yeah, because I wasn't seeing
Yeah.
balance with two elements here. So there were a lot of you that did leading lines sort of the same way. And the point I wanted to make about it kind of is, but the one thing that you want to do to really make a leading line work is it needs to lead to something. There should be a subject at some point along that leading line to draw your eye to it. And this is a relatively straight leading line, which is a little unusual. So more often than not, we see a diagonal or a curve or something like that. And this one's just sort of a straight line up. So it would have probably helped to have, I don't know, somebody walking those steps up near the top or something. Well, that would have been dangerous, I understand.
Yeah.
But maybe a dog or a cat or I don't know, something. So within the letter of, the compositional element, yeah, it does create a leading line. But just keep in mind that when you use a compositional element like that, you want it to be, if at all possible, for a purpose to lead, in this case, to lead your eye to something rather than just, move. Now, convergence, on the other hand, is one that tends to lead to nothing. Like it will just,
Yeah.
kind of come down to a point or something like that. But leading lines, typically, you want it to lead to something. And God, I hope all that stuff's gone by the end of this week. I've
Yeah.
seen enough snow to last me a lifetime.
Half of it melted like this week, I noticed. So
Well, today and tomorrow should do a number
Yeah.
on it. So hopefully. Okay, so what do we have here other than a kitty cat?
okay. So this is just an extra picture that I took just because it was more of like practicing like close up pictures, I guess.
Okay, so the one now again, when I give you guys constructive criticism, I don't want you to get discouraged and think, oh my God, he's picking on every little detail. But it's those details that actually add up to a much better photograph if you can see them. And the other thing is that a lot of things are seemingly outside of your control, but honestly, the more you see the things that you need to adjust or change, the more you'll find that you actually do have control over them. In this case, there's one thing that kind of is a bit of a problem or a distraction. Anybody want to take a guess what I might be talking about?
I'm
Is it the
going to
sh-
say it's probably the stuff in the background.
So the background stuff is a little on the cluttered side, but it is at least out of focus. So we have a sharp focus on the cat, and and obviously we've got the ball back there is probably a toy that he plays with and things like that. So I can
Yeah.
see I see reasons for those things being there, but it's not a distraction so much as I'm not sure what word to use, but somebody else had a thought. What was it?
I was just gonna say it's the shoes on the left, but
So that's one little thing, yeah, that is because they don't. Now, if the cat was playing with the shoes, that would be something different, obviously. But because they don't seem to fit the scene, and again, this would have been it would have been an easy thing to just crop out. I probably would have done that, but there's still one other thing. Carly, do you have an idea?
I was just gonna say crop it a little bit because it just seems like there's so much open space with the wood. But that was just all I was gonna say.
There is, and again, cropping those shoes off would do that. It would, either take it to a square or a vertical or something like that. But the thing that I was getting at is the amputated paw.
Yeah.
So again, when you're dealing with animals, they're unpredictable and they are moving. I get all of that. But literally a slight tilt down with the camera would have probably caught that paw.
Mhm.
And it's the same thing with humans. Whenever you crop off at a joint, like a wrist, an elbow, a knee, something like that, does have the look of a little bit of an amputation. And it's just a little bit, you either want to go in really close and eliminate everything but the face and the torso, or you want to make sure that, you've got all the body
Yeah.
parts in there. But again, just a small thing to keep in mind that because not a lot of people really keep those things in mind when they're just out taking pictures. You're looking at the cat, you're looking at the cat's eyes, which is the focal point of that image. But it is a bit of a distraction to have a joint cut off like that. So just kind of be aware of that. What do we got? I think I know what this one is. I think it's a
That's
little.
balance.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a little different take on balance. It's not so much the balance that we talked about as far as composition, but it's kind of a cute take on it because it is balance. I mean, it is in a different sense of the
Yeah.
word. I think what I would have done to make this even stronger is I definitely would have cropped out that door on the right
Mhm.
and just had a much simpler, and probably even the baseboard at the bottom, and just had a much simpler composition. Let me open that and take a quick look at it. Plus, you would have been able to actually add another compositional element by doing that. It'd take me a second to get Photoshop open here. Give me a second. Maybe more than a second. Not sure why this is dragging. It's not like there's a lot going on this computer, but it just does not want to load. Give it a second. If it doesn't go, we'll move on. All right, well, it'll come up eventually. But if you can just sort of envision this, like where it is in the upper left-hand corner, coming down to the baseboard, coming over to the edge of the pink wall and back up. Now we not only have a very plain nondescript background behind. In fact, you can do it with your hands. Just hold your hands up and kind of cover those areas, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Plus, you move that stack of books over to that impact line on the rule of thirds on the right hand side, rather than having it in the middle too. Not that being in the middle for balance is a bad thing, but because I'd like to crop that door and that baseboard out, I think it adds that extra compositional element. Anytime you can, you have a photograph with more than one compositional element, you're going to have a winner usually. So just kind of keep that in mind. And so kind of for all of you, what I really would like you to do is every picture you take, or every picture that you're about to submit, at least take a look at it. And once you've taken it, and say, can I crop anything off of this image? Is everything in the frame, does it all have a purpose? Is there a reason for it to be there, or is it a distraction? Can it stay? Can it go? Whatever. If you can answer that question, if you see something and you're like, yeah, that really doesn't add to it, get rid of it. Just crop it out. And it doesn't matter whether you end up with square or slimline or whatever. You'll typically make your images a little stronger when you do that. So, and this is probably a case in point for that here. I think this would have been a really good slimline image, cropped straight across. But which element is this, by the way?
I can't remember which one that is, but I can look.
Yeah, I'm not really picking up on what it is, to be honest with you, of the ones that we looked at.
Yeah.
I mean, I like what you did. It's a cool idea, but I'm just not sure. Let me take a quick look at those elements. So yeah, we had rule of thirds. It's not rule of thirds. It's not balance. It's contrast, possibly. It's not.
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
Yeah, contrast because of the
Yeah.
colors. Yeah, that's of all of the ones that are on there. It's not leading lines or conversions, so it's got to be for contrast. And yeah,
Yeah.
I think I probably would have just actually, let me close this. I just would have cropped it down to a long, thin horizontal of just those
Yeah.
markers and get rid of all the extra space. It just isn't doing much. But I'm just also checking out. You do have your point of focus is on the front tips of the markers, so that's pretty appropriate. I'm not
Yeah.
sure what your at F5, so they're not going to maintain focus all the way to the back, but as long as the front points are in focus, we're in good shape. All right, so we got that, and then we've got this, which not sure about this one either.
I think that one's convergence, I think, for the.
Yeah, I'm not really getting.
I don't know. It was like
what's
one of the ones where it
converging.
was like two-toned, where there was like two different colors in a picture, I think.
Was that balance? Or
Yeah, I'm not seeing. I'm just not seeing it. Which if it's balance or convergence or. I mean, you could make a case for leading lines that the power lines are kind of leading you down out of the sky into the foreground area, but be careful too. This is another one of those images which is just off a little bit. It's not straight and it's not way off. It's just off a little bit, and it
Yeah.
tends to look like the Family Dollar there is going to fall off into a chasm somewhere. So you just always want to watch that horizon line. The easiest way to get that, there's this cable that goes right above the buildings all the way
Yeah.
across it straight. That would have been an easy thing to line up on to get them a little straighter. All right, and then your last one is what? That is not rule of thirds. It's not balance. It's not contrast. It's not leading lines. It's not convergence. I'm not sure what that is.
I don't know. It was because I kept seeing pictures of like things and they looked like lines, and I don't
Yeah. So, and
know
again,
recall what it was.
they do create lines, but again, they don't
Yeah.
they don't lead anywhere to something, and that's what you want a leading line to do, is to lead to something. This would probably be, now if it were daylight, it doesn't look like it was daylight. It looked like it was night. But
Yeah,
if
it
it was
was.
if it was daylight and the blinds were up, then you've got framing.
Yeah.
You got that compositional element because you're framing the outside world with the window. So that would have worked. Of all of these, as it stands, I actually think I like your balance one the best, just because it's
Yeah.
a different take on the theme. Typically, like I said, when we're talking about balance in composition, we're talking about two elements that play against each other. And you do have two elements. You've got the figure on top and you've got the books below, but they're not, they're not separated to the point. But I still like the idea. I still like the fact that, you've got this little guy balanced up there. All right. So yeah, and so for next week, just make sure that you title the images with the compositional element that they are. That way I'll know what we're looking at. All right, Jaden's up next. So this, I'm not sure if it's, let me look here. 1, 2, 3. Because you've got, looking for the missing element. The only one that's not here is balance, but that's not really balance. Is that a, because the title of it is Flowers Soft Light. So I'm not sure if there's a,
Oh, I don't know why it's. I didn't name it Flower Softlight. That's weird.
yeah, so I'm not sure.
Oh, that's supposed to be the converging lines.
Okay, yeah. So and so what you've done is you've reversed the convergence. The convergence takes place at the front of the element rather than the back, which is it's an interesting take, and it works. This is a really difficult image to keep in any kind of focus, obviously, because of the distance. But you were at f4. I think I definitely would have, even if it, because your ISO was at 100, you could have bumped that way up and tried to get like f11, f16 or something. It would have given you a lot more focus on the markers. But as far as the compositional element, yeah, they do converge. They converge in a reverse pattern. The lighting is, does give some shadowing, so it gives some form and dimension. So all of that seems to work, no problem there. And I like the fact that you picked all different colors. So rule of thirds here, it is. I will say that I would probably, I really like the contrast of that ball against that carpet and most of your background, which is a black, or dark gray, charcoal, whatever. It sets off really well. With the rule of thirds, you're on that right third line, but you're in between the two impact points. Because remember, you in the rule of thirds, you divide the frame into thirds, both horizontally and vertically. So moving that ball either up or down a little bit would have not only been on that right-hand line, it would have been on the upper or lower line. And I probably would have moved it up because of the highlights that are above the ball, which are a little distracting. So if the ball comes up a little bit, we crop a little bit of that off. Or, and I don't know how far this background extended over to the left, moving the camera to the right to show, to separate that ball against that darker background a little bit would have been pretty cool too. But overall, you were definitely on the right path here. To get the ball in a contrasting situation like that, to keep it on that right third line. And you don't always have to be on one of the impact points, but if it's possible, why not? Because it does make it a little bit stronger that way. But you definitely got it on there, and I think you placed this in the right spot to minimize as many distractions as you could, and the background being out of focus helps. I think I probably just would have moved it up just a touch to make it a little bit better. Contrast, good on contrast. This is color contrast that works pretty well. Again, the scissors create some diagonals and things, which we'll talk about this week. It's a different compositional element, so I like that. I don't know, minor thing. Maybe I would have shot it from a very slightly higher angle, so we didn't see the top edge of the book. But that's a pretty minor thing. So. Not going to complain too much about it. It does work for contrast. I keep looking at so a lot of your f-stops are very shallow at f4. Again, this is another one that probably could have, because of the fact that the front edge of those scissors are going out of focus. I probably would have bumped that f-stop down to 11, something like that, just to see if I can get more of that in focus. But minor things. Overall, it's a pretty good contrast image. This one, I'm guessing, is balance. It says 2 subjects in 1 frame, which I think is what a lot of you kind of inferred by balance, was that there were 2 things there. And what I like about this one is that we don't even really know what that back thing is. Like, we don't have to. It's just a dark spot that does balance with the elephant in the foreground. But again, I'm going to look probably, yeah, you're at f4 on all of these. I think you could have gone a little beyond this elephant's back front leg is the point of focus, and the head is out of focus. So a little more depth of field on that probably still would have kept this back element out of focus. But again, I'm being kind of nitpicky here because overall the image has got impact. It's nice that you've isolated that you have contrast here too. You've got a couple of things working. You've got the elephant pretty much on that rule of thirds line, which balances against the thing in the back, whatever that is. So you do have a few things working here. Just maybe a little bit more depth of field would have made this thing even more, but I do like it. I think you did a good job with that. And this one says leading lines, maybe like maybe it is. And so again, this is sort of a reverse leading line because it does lead somewhere. All of these branches do lead somewhere. They lead to the trunk. And normally we're used to seeing leading lines, branch out in a photograph away from us. In this case, they come in, but there's nothing wrong with that. It definitely works. Not overly dynamic necessarily, but it does, satisfy the, the element. So I think all of these images, like especially these four, are pretty well done as far as satisfying what it was they were trying to do. Do you have a favorite one that you like?
I like the elephant one.
Yeah, I think for me, it was either that or the scissors. I think I like both of those. So let's do the elephant. It's the elephant in the room. All right. Yeah, overall, Jaden, really well done.
Thank you.
All right, Caleb's up next. So this is obviously balance again. So be careful, obviously, when shooting into windows like this because of that blooming loss of contrast that you get. I think if you had just lowered the blinds, that would have helped immensely. And you still would have had the highlight coming through the glass of the bottle or whatever that is in the foreground. It also is creating a little bit of an ultraviolet cast in that in the couch there, but it is balanced. The foreground element is in focus. The background element is out, but that's not a problem in a balanced image. They don't both have to be in focus, so no problem there. I think I just would have. Yeah, I think the only thing I would have suggested to you here would have been to pull the blinds down to get a little less of that blooming effect.
They don't come down.
Oh, they don't come down. Okay, well, I probably would have moved the camera somewhere else then. Yeah, that kind of makes it inconvenient, doesn't it?
Yeah.
All right, so this one you've got labeled as leading lines, and you can make a case for that because we've got both the floor, but especially the ceiling, which is creating these lines down. Honestly, we haven't looked at it. We'll look at it this week, but this is probably closer to framing than it is to leading lines. And then there's one thing about this that, and we haven't really gotten into too much editing yet, but the one thing about this that would have made this a whole lot stronger, I'm going to open this in Photoshop and show you something that you can do to correct this. Let me share that. Oh, no, it's going to take me out of this. Yep, let me share it again. Okay, so we get when the back of the camera is not perpendicular to every object in front of it, we get this leaning effect. Like if you're at the base of a tall building or something looking up, you're going to get that perspective going in like that. And if you have a lot of that, it's actually a good thing. Like a lot of people will photograph buildings that way. When you have a little bit of it, it's a little bit of a distraction. And so there's a real easy way to fix this. I'm going to go into free transfer. Well, actually, I have to unlock the background first. There's a little lock icon on the background. And when I turn that off, now I can transform this background layer. So I'm just going to hit Command T or Control T on Windows, and it puts this bounding box around it. And then if I hold down the command key on a Mac or the control key on Windows, I can take any of these points and move them independently. So I can take this top one and drag it over to straighten that line up and drag the right one over the same way. And just like that, it just makes it, you know, keeps all your verticals straight and you know, things that are supposed to be straight, and all of that. So it makes it, you know, it's a tiny little thing, but if you look at the before and after, it's just one of those little things, one of those tiny little things that goes a long way towards making something a little bit more interesting. Let me get back to that. But overall, I like the shot. I think your exposure is really good on this. I kind of like the fact, I mean, I don't know. I'd like to have seen this maybe at dusk or something with a wee little bit of detail in that background, but at the same time, it kind of creates this monochromatic feel this way that we might not have had with that too. So I kind of like that. This has definitely got some contrast to it, some color contrast. Did you do any editing on this at all? It looks like it's got a little crispness to it.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad thing. You did pretty well. I think, and that ultraviolet that we get in snow sometimes, especially later in the day, that turns it a little bit blue, kind of works in this case because it mirrors some of the colors in that, whatever it is that we're looking at. Is that a building or like a what's the word I'm looking for? Like a shed or something? Is that what that is?
Yeah, that's down by the reservoir.
So a lot of people, it looks like, have had a crack at some graffiti on that. But yeah, that works for contrast. Rule of thirds, same thing. It's a little confusing because there's so much going on here. It's a little bit hard to pick out the subject, but especially like this branch that's in the front here that's kind of out of focus. That's looks like it's about to attack the back of his head. There's a lot of little confusing things here, but it is definitely rule of thirds. This one I like. I think this is my favorite shot of yours. Let me go back. Yeah, definitely. So convergence, this was a great idea to create some, not to just find convergence, but to actually create something. I think initially when I looked at it, I do have a suggestion. So initially when I looked at it, I don't know what the black thing is that it's sitting on, the fabric. I thought that I found that a little distracting and I wanted to see it just maybe on the white floor or tile or whatever that is. But then I realized that the color probably wouldn't be as pronounced without it. So I might have just found some kind of a black cloth or something. I don't know what, is it like that's is it a cup holder and a chair?
Cup holder and a chair.
Okay. So now I get it. Now I understand. But yeah, if you had a piece of black cloth, you could have laid it over that, kind of stuffed it down into that cup holder and done the same thing and had a little fewer distractions. But
my carpet's actually black, so I could have moved it over there.
yeah, but overall, it was a great idea to do this. You know, to create that convergence that way. I think it's pretty clever. So that's definitely my favorite image of all of yours. Yeah, there's a couple in there that are pretty decent, but that one was my favorite. All right, so on to Brooke, and we've got, so this is convergence, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And I like your behind the scenes of convergence, showing how you achieved that. So that's pretty cool. I like the pullbacks. Yeah, this definitely is that. I would just caution you to, again, watch your point of focus because the floor is in focus, but the skull is not. And I'd rather have it be the other way around. But overall, pretty interesting take on it. You know, maybe again, same comment that I made to Caleb, I might have actually laid some kind of a solid cloth or something there to make it stand out even more. And the exposure is probably a little under too, probably should come up just a little bit, but all minor things. The convergence aspect of it, you did pretty well. I like your leading lines, your Justin Bieber.
Yeah.
What is he on? What is that?
He's on my heater.
Okay.
Actually, I taped him to the heater.
That's kind of what I thought it was. It looked like maybe he used it to blow dry his hair. I don't know. But that, to me, this one is really cool. This one's really fun. It's really creative. We've got, a pretty isolated background. We do have some, but even the lines in the cement block are creating these diagonals for us, which kind of help a lot. And they go against the diagonals of the lines coming up to him. It's a simple shot. It's a good, color harmony shot. There is some black in the heater that matches what he's wearing. Everything else is sort of cream and brown tones. That's a really good image. That one I enjoyed a lot. So contrast, yep, we've got, whenever we have colors in different families, we're going to have contrast. Probably the only, if I'm going to make any suggestion on this at all, let me look at your metadata. Yeah, especially because it is an iPhone, but what model? SE.
I see.
Yeah, so you may not have the portrait mode on that. I'm not sure.
I do. I
do
just
you?
can't figure out how to use it.
I think it might have been fun to maybe pull those away from the background and use that portrait mode to blur the background out a little bit. We would have had less, the texture in your foreground items would have been way more pronounced without all the texture in the background. But, with that being said, it still satisfies. We've got the contrast that we're looking for, so no problem there. So balance on this one, again, probably not so much a different take. There is balance between the skull. You're into skulls, I can see that.
Yeah.
Between the skull and the birds. And then we've also got, again, so we've got a triangle with, two diagonals that form a triangle for us, which is another element that we like to see in images. The fact that they're lit up creates a little more drama and mystery with them. So that's a pretty good one as well. And then rule of thirds, which it kind of is, again, your exposure on this, I think, is a little under overall. And we're not really highlighting our subject probably well enough. Like if there had been some light, I think, on your foreground subject, or maybe just the exposure coming up, I'm not sure, would have helped it a lot. And it's just it's a little bit off. It's not right on that rule of thirds, but it's pretty close. But I do like all three of these. I think your Justin Bieber is my favorite though, unless you disagree.
No, that's cool.
Yeah, he's got a lot going for him here. Probably a lot more than the real Justin Bieber does. All right, Max, let's see. So we've got, I didn't move these. They're in separate folders. So this one says balance.
Yeah, I wasn't really sure what balance was, and I looked it up and I was still confused. And I originally wasn't even going to put a picture for it, but I was just like, maybe this one has balance in it. So
I see it more actually as framing, and we'll look at framing in the second half of the class today. I do love well, actually perspective. This would be another one, perspective and viewpoint, which are very similar as well. It could be any of those three, because when you first look at it, you're like, what the heck am I even looking at? You have to really study it for a second to figure it out. But it's monochromatic. I think I might have even taken it actually to black and white. I think that would have been really cool, even though it's pretty monochromatic to start with. Maybe not so much balance, but still a really cool image. Balance typically is just simply you have two elements in a photograph that either with weight or position or something that connects the two of them, they play against each other. And you do have, lights that you could say are kind of doing that, but it's not quite the same thing, because I see this as a single element rather than multiple ones. But yeah, overall, pretty interesting shot. This is something I think would be worth playing with again at some point in the future, like going back to this location and trying to find something that would make this, I don't know. It seems like there's something that would be there. So are you looking up or looking down in this picture?
I was looking up. I was
Looking
like
up.
I was on the ground, like looking up the stairwell. Yeah.
So imagine if there's somebody at the top of that stairwell looking down, like right between those two lights in the center. Now you've got symmetry and balance and framing, and you've got all kinds of stuff going on that
Oh,
could be
that would
really
be
cool.
cool. That'd be a cool
Yeah.
picture.
Yeah, and let them be the only thing that has any massive amount of color, because everything else is so monochromatic. You could really make them pop and stand out. Yeah, this is a spot you might want to go back to at some point. All right, contrast. I like more than anything. I think I like your title, Snow to Pop.
Yeah, back to the Coca-Cola. I was like, what can I do with contrast? And I just bought that from the vending machine and tossed it outside.
Well, it works. I like the light source being in the background there a little bit. I think that's kind of interesting. And of course, we've got a lot of light, enough light on the foreground, which, you know, would kill it if you didn't. Like if you just didn't have that bottle lit the way it was. So that's a pretty good one. I like that. Convergence definitely works for convergence. You do have leading lines as well on the you know, where the floor meets the walls, but overall, because of the fact that it leads to a single point and there's really no center of focus back there, yeah, that's pretty much convergence. So easy on that one. So leading lines, you do have leading lines, or a leading line rather, leading to is that a Lego Moby Dick?
Yeah, it's just a whale, but I decided to call it Moby Dick because.
Gotcha. So if I would only make one suggestion on this, if you had recomposed or cropped it, even crop a little bit off the top, what would happen is you would not only have the leading line, you would also have rule of thirds in that. You would have brought it up to that intersection of that top third, maybe actually the impact point itself. I'm not sure. That's the only suggestion I would give you for this one, because I think it's kind of cool otherwise. And then the lonely salt shaker for your rule of thirds. And again, we've got contrast here because you've used an element that contrasts nicely with the background. So yeah, all of those are good. Let me go back through here. Wow. As much as I really like that image, I'm not sure that it probably satisfies the requirement for balance. So I think this is probably what I think is your best image in the bunch right here. And also has simplicity going for it. So you've got really about 3 or 4 different compositional elements in this one shot that's working for you. So I think you did pretty well with that.
Yep, that works for me. Thank you.
Gotcha. All right, Meech, are you there? I saw you come in, but I'm not sure if you're still there.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, cool. Okay, so this one is labeled leading lines. It is a little bit. I guess probably more with the steps than with the shoes, because the shoes aren't really pointing at anything, but the steps are kind of pointing at the shoes, sort of.
Yeah, that's what I was that's what I was going to. Yeah, the steps pointing to the shoes.
Gotcha. I think so. The only thing I would have done a little differently here would have been probably to rotate this a bit so that those steps weren't verticals, but a little more of a diagonal leading us in from the lower left to the upper right. That would have been a little more dynamic to it. But again, that's kind of a minor thing. So it does work. And then we've got, so explain to me perspective, what it is about this that you see perspective in.
Literally, like, I took a step out of my front door one day and then just like took a picture of this. I was like, this is just a beautiful day. Like, the background behind the photo is basically also what gives me the perspective, because like, yeah, like I said, I just walked outside and then just put my phone up and they just took this picture, no edits and nothing, just like straight. Just took it right as soon as I looked at it. So it's just how, like, this is the view of my day. Like, this is what I see going like right out my front door.
And that was not this week. Definitely not this week.
It was not. It was not.
So there's one, there's a distraction and a comment I'll make to you about like cropping the vehicle off like that can be a good thing or a bad thing. Can be a
Mhm.
bad thing in that it looks a little bit chopped off, but on the other side, you can make a case for the fact that it creates this tension in the image, and that we don't really need to see the front of the vehicle because that might not be, even though it's the largest thing, excuse me,
Mhm.
and it's in the foreground, it may not actually be the subject. So I'm not going to knock it too much for that. But there is the one distraction that really kind of jumps out at me right off the bat. Anybody see it? It's that little piece of roof in the upper right-hand corner sticking out into the sky. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So either a little cropping or a little cloning to get rid of that, I think, because again, if you squint at this image, and that's one of the telltale things that you do to see if you've got a problem, you squint at that image. I see the house on the right, obviously, but I also see that little piece of the gutter sticking out, which is just a
Gotcha.
little bit of a distraction. I probably would have, in the future when you have the opportunity to get rid of that in some way, I would. So this one, simplicity, it is. And so you are, you're obviously a little bit hampered by, using the phone. You don't have the ability to, you can zoom a little bit, but you don't have the
Mhm.
same ability that you would with a camera with a zoom lens or something like that. I think this would have been a really good example of this if the boat were a lot closer, like if it wasn't intersecting with the horizon line in the background. And again, I recognize you didn't go out and shoot this for the
Mhm.
assignment because this is obviously not recent.
Mhm.
But if I can envision this like with the boat a little closer in the line, in the path that it took, and maybe a lot less of the foreground, like if I just hold my hand up there and cover a lot of that foreground, now I just see a little bit of water, the boat, the skyline. In fact, I might even take out some of the clouds and make it a horizontal. Then I think you got a pretty strong image there overall.
Gotcha.
But and actually you could do it with this. Let me open it up and just real quickly share that. Hang on 1 second. All right, you guys seeing that now, the image?
Mhm.
All right, so if I just move this, well, try. Why is that not moving? There we go. Yeah, look what happens. You see, so when you put the cropping lines on, or when you go to crop an image, it gives you this overlay of the rule of thirds. When you move that up, look where that boat falls, right on that impact point.
Mhm.
And now, wow, you've got a way, way, way stronger image than it was originally. We've got enough of the sky. We don't need to see any more than that to identify. We've got enough of the water. We don't need any more of that. And even though the boat is still intersecting with that horizon line in the back, it's still a way stronger image than it was before. So again, just like I said at the beginning, always ask yourselves when you have a picture that you're ready to submit, look at it and ask that question: is there something I can improve by cropping it? Is there something that I can take out to make it stronger, or by cropping it, can I move my subject to a different spot or something like that? And it generally will give you a if there is something there, you'll see it. All right.
Gotcha.
So I think honestly, I think this is probably of the three a little more dynamic. This one I would have loved had the cropping been done, but as it sits here, I think that one is probably just a little stronger. And even it's got an odd white balance to it, like it's a little blue cast overall. That kind of doesn't bother me. It's it looks like maybe dusk or something like that. So
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that.
Later.
Nothing wrong with that. All right. Moving to Ross now, we've got contrast. So everybody seems to love taking food items and throwing them in the snow. But it works. If you're trying to contrast something and you've got all this snow, you might as well make it work. Kit Kats are probably one of my favorite chocolate bars, and I do like them cold. I'm weird. I put them in the refrigerator. I don't freeze them because I don't want to break my teeth, but I do like that. The only thing that's a wee little bit odd to me about this is its positioning. I think this one would benefit by being directly in the center, and to do that, maybe just shave a little bit off the right to pull that, bar right back to the center. It's on a diagonal already, which is a good thing, rather than straight across. But the contrast part of it, you nailed it. No problem there at all. Good exposure. All of that looks good. Rule of thirds, it is, because both of these, both of your elements are on those intersections. The other thing, excuse me, that this is also a good one for balance. This is, let me see, you do have a good balance one in here as well already, but this one could suffice for that as well, because we have two elements that are sort of equal in weight and importance and size even, and they play off of each other. And, it's clearly done intentionally. Like nobody would take a picture of this person and compose it this way unless it was intentional to put that art piece in there. So, when something's a little more obvious, it feels right. Convergence. And so, yeah, again, leading lines and convergence. This one does converge to a subject, which again isn't a bad thing. It's never a bad thing, actually, to have a subject in there. If I were going to change anything, yeah, if I were going to change anything, Ross, I would have had you get way more uncomfortable than you were taking this, I think, and get the camera even lower. And if you can envision what'll happen with the camera coming lower, we eliminate this white door frame, probably, if you can get that low, so that the steps would rise a little higher, and her head and body probably are now going to intersect with the red brick, which is going to stand out a little bit more. Minor thing, nothing wrong with what you did. I'm just looking for little things I can throw at you to improve it. And if that means laying down in the snow, so be it.
No, I agree with you. It was soaking wet on the ground, and
oh yeah, so I wouldn't have done it myself, but unless I had a big rubber sheet with me. But yeah, I mean, when you look at an image, and so when a viewer looks at an image, they don't know that. They don't know, how nasty it was or whatever, because it looks like, well, the steps coming down are clear, right? It's going to be clear all the way. So it's just a suggestion, but overall, it was still done pretty well. So I like this one for balance as well. Again, we've got two elements that are playing against each other, and actually have a purpose here, because we've got the campus map. Main hall is obviously on the campus map, so it's kind of a cool juxtaposition between the two. Let me move this for a second so I can see. Yeah, if anything, I might have maybe shaved a little bit off of the left side just to make those two things a little more centered together, but very minor. And then leading lines, which it is, but again, we need a subject on there somewhere. We need somebody on that walkway about 2/3 of the way back. It is a leading line, but it's not leading to anything at this point. Just as same comment that I've made, to a number of you already. Not knocking it overall, because it did satisfy, but I think that would have made it stronger. I think honestly, for me, I like these two the best. Do you have a favorite between the two? Or actually, we could still throw this one in too, because I still like that as well.
I do like the rule of thirds one.
This one. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's, again, when I see an image that I can say, okay, it was obviously done, that was an intent, then I can kind of sink my teeth into it a little bit. I like that. All right, Samantha's up next. These are probably coming up in different order than what you think, but that's just how I have them sorted in my, let's see what happens if we change that. Yep, it does change it. So let's start here with balance. So this is what you've got listed as balance. I can see why you went with that, But honestly, this is probably way closer to an element that we're going to talk about in the second half of class, and that's symmetry, because we have a very, very symmetrical image here. There's only one little very minor issue. Can anybody say what it is?
It's I don't think it's like it's just a little
Yeah.
bit to the right.
Yeah, if you look at the left side of the doorway in particular, it's just leaning just ever so slightly. But man, this is a really for symmetry. If you were trying to illustrate symmetry, this is a really good example of it. I like the way you framed it and composed it. I like everything that you did with this. And like I said, I do see where you were headed with balance. I just think it's a little closer to symmetry. But yeah, straighten that up just that little bit of a touch, and you've got a really strong, and you can always tell this. I'm going to open this in Photoshop and show you guys.
Yeah, the disclaimer is when I thought of balance, I was thinking like balance not as the elephant picture, but as like next to each other. So like the poles were balanced and the bushes were balanced, which now I know is symmetry. So
yeah, and it's like I said, a lot of these elements are so similar that it's really sometimes hard to differentiate between them. But the good news is that you've got a really good image here, regardless of what you call it. It's a good image. But when I put activate the cropping tool and I start to rotate and it gets this grid on it, you can immediately see the horizontal or the vertical lines, and just rotating it that much lines all of that up and straightens the whole thing a good bit.
Oh yeah, I was
so
gonna
satisfying.
ask you to do that because I didn't know. I was using the presets on my Mac, and when I was cropping, I couldn't figure out how to get the rotate one. So
yeah,
I didn't realize that. But
when you're doing, if you are using Photoshop and you activate the cropping tool, what you have to do is actually move your cursor outside your image. And if you can see it, I don't know if you can see it on the screen, but it's got the little cropping icon here. But when I move it outside, it turns into this rotation icon, this little double arrow. And that's how you know you're gonna be moving it and dragging it, twisting it, all that kind of stuff. And it works similarly in Lightroom and in Camera Raw and things like that as well. So, all right, let's. Poor Hannah, she just is getting beat up like crazy. She's getting knocked out like every other minute. She's getting knocked out. Hannah, are you there, Hannah?
Yeah, I'm here.
Do you have is your internet powered by gerbils or something? Is that how that works?
No, it just went out. So
yeah, I feel bad for you because you're just having such a tough time. You keep getting bumped out on us.
yeah.
Thank God this is all recorded and you can always, entertain yourself later. All right, so let's move on. So we've got this one as contrast. Not the strongest of your images, but it does have, obviously the bench does contrast with the background. It's in the same color family, but the light tones and the dark tones, cause that contrast. If I were going to change anything at all, it probably would have just been to crop a lot of that grass off in the foreground to make it a little stronger. And that, if you look at the line, the vertical line and the bricks in the corner there being a little bit off as well, if you straighten that up, then you're going to actually tilt the bench more, which might be kind of cool. I don't know. But we're kind of nitpicking an image that's, it is what it is. So, we're not going to go too far with that. So this one's labeled as convergence. I see it a little more as leading lines because now if there were railings on both sides and they came down to a point, then I think maybe you'd have a better case for that. This is also a good possibility for framing because we've got these little squares in your railing that create these little sub pictures inside. So this might be a good thing to think about because next week framing will be one of the elements to think about an area like this that you can find something interesting and frame, and just like to just see the railing, nothing outside the railing, just the railing and that square inside. That would be kind of cool. But you got to get something kind of cool in behind there, right? Whether it's a person or, a flying donkey or, well, use your imagination. All right, so we've got a leading line. And normally I would say on an image like this, like we talked about before, we like our eye to come in from the left side of the image. And I would say, oh, you should flip this image and have it come in from the left, but you really can't, because we've got a lot of things. We've got posters, we've got words, we've got, addresses on the mailboxes and things like that. And unless you go in and really do a lot of work in flipping those elements back, you just can't flip this image. But I love the fact that you've got this really elegant S-curve in your foreground. Again, I'd like to have seen a car on there somewhere, like 2/3 of the way back, but not going to knock it for what it is. It's definitely got a nice leading line. We also have a little, a lot of these, especially the ones, that are shot in the snow or on overcast days like this, have this very cool color balance. I think it probably could have benefited by warming that up a little bit. And there's a lot of ways to do that, even if it's not a raw file initially. But again, we haven't gotten too much into that yet, so we're not gonna beat you up. So this one says rule of thirds, but I'm looking to find what it is that's on one of those intersecting points that's rule of thirds. Can you help me out here?
I was going for the lamp on the right, that the lamp was in the top left square. I probably should have put it on the cross where it intersected and it would had more power. But
yeah,
when I was thinking about it, I was thinking of it's in the third of the square. So it's
right,
in
okay,
that row, but also that thing was at the top of the top square.
gotcha. Yeah, it definitely needs to be on that either one or the other of the three lines. The one vertical or on either side, it's going to have three lines, one vertical, two horizontal, or on one of the impact points, even better. Because with it off of that, if it's just in the that ninth square that it creates, it's not quite the same effect as being on one of the lines or one of the impact points. But going back through, even though we've got some minor issues with this, I really think this is a really good image. I think this was this was pretty well done, other than a minor, and even though it's more balanced or more symmetry than balance, and it's just a wee little bit over, I think this is also a cool image. Like I think I could play with this and do a few effects on this that could make this a really, really colorful, interesting image. This is a spot that I think I would visit again too, because I think that there's something here. There's definitely a good shot there.
The glass, the colored glass with the brick, it was interesting. And then the poles, because they're so straight. My picture's not straight, but they are. It was just interesting to look at.
Yeah, it's a great spot. I mean, I know the spot obviously, and it's it's a shame that you wasted your symmetry image this week, because now you got to go find another one. But that's a really, really good example of that. So I like that one a lot. All right, Sammy's up next. We've got, so a couple of these, I'm not real sure. You have to help me out. This one says balance, but again, I think the balance one kind of threw a few of you for a loop. What is it about this that you felt was in balance, or what elements were balanced against each other? If you're there, I think you're there. Oh, nope, she's not there. Okay. She's one of the missing ones today. Hang on a second. Okay. So I'm just going to run through these. First of all, I do like the image. I think she got there at a really good time. This is what I was talking about. The exposure is maybe a little under. I'd like to see this pumped up a little bit. But this is a great time of day to photograph something like this, right at dusk, where you still have some detail in that sky, and it mirrors the blue and the ultraviolet light hitting the snow in the foreground. The color contrast between the blue and the yellow, that's a really good thing. again, I might have done a little, it's not that the building is crooked, it's not crooked, but it does have a little convergence because of the camera being pointed up. And just like the shot through the main hall doors, I think that we looked at earlier, would have maybe been benefited by stretching it back a little bit. But overall, it's a pretty good shot. This one's listed as contrast. Again, it's maybe not the best example of contrast, but it's a pretty cool shot still. It's an interesting exposure. Like we've let this light really brighten the snow, but it's not completely blown out. I can still see detail in there. And again, we've got the warm and the cool colors contrasting each other. So I like that. This one's listed as convergence. Probably more leading lines, but this one is listed as leading lines, and it kind of is, and it does lead to that flag. So I like that. I like the fact that all of the railings and the steps lead up to that flag. I like the extreme angle on it. This one is listed as rule of thirds. I actually see this more as balance between the two elements here, but you could make a case for either one. I think overall, I really like the mansion shot. I think I could work on this in Photoshop for like just a minute or two and really make this one sing too. I think she's got a lot here to work with. All right, so we'll move on. Since she's not here, we're going to Savannah. And this one is listed as balance. So normally you want to see a little more separation between your two balanced images, but I do see what you were going for. We do have two separate images. They do contrast with each other. Yeah, I'd say maybe not the best example of balance, but I don't think I think most of you struggled more with balance than with anything else. So, not going to beat it up too much. Again, we've got that little cool color cast going on that I might like to see warmed up a little bit. Might be kind of interesting, but overall, again, it's just one of those images that is what it is. So I like this one. Again, this was not this week, obviously. I will caution you that your horizon line is probably just a wee little bit off. And you could tell obviously by, just throwing the cropping tool on it. But overall, great effect, great look at the sky. Now this, to me, it has a little underexposed. Yeah, it's a little underexposed, but there are times where you can get away with that, especially when you've got highlights like this on the water that you may not want to lose entirely. I probably would have brought it up a little bit in exposure and then straightened that horizon line a touch, but I love the composition. Your horizon line is in a great spot. It is not in the center of your image, which is never a good thing. Well, I won't say it's never a good thing. If you're doing symmetry, it can be. But typically you want that horizon line on that rule of thirds, either the lower or the upper one, and that's right where it is. You've also got leading lines being created by the flare from the sun. So you've got 2 or 3 different elements going on here that make this a pretty interesting image. I think if it was just straightened a little bit, maybe increased in exposure a little bit, I think we'd have, in fact, I want to see it so bad that way that I'm going to go in and do it. Hang on one second. Let me share that. All right, so we're going to clear that. We're going to keep your pretty much square crop. Snapping is on. Yeah, wow, boy, it didn't take much to pull that over. And then keep that as much as we can on the left edge. And then let's just pull up the exposure. Yeah, you can see when you bring up this dialogue, this histogram is showing us sort of the representation of the light to dark pixels. So dark pixels are on the left, midtones are in the middle, and the brighter pixels are on the right. And you can see there really aren't any. Like I can pull this all the way down. When I go beyond that, I start losing detail. But I can pull it all the way down there and still get, a better look. And then maybe even pull the midtones back and then darken the shadows to compensate. So let's look at the before and after. See, it's a little bit muddy in that regard, and that kind of brightens the whole thing up. And we don't really lose any detail in the sky or anything. So I kind of like that.
Yeah,
Just
I do
wanted
like that a lot
just
better.
yeah, just wanted to see what it would look like. So I knew it would look good. I just wanted, visual verification, but I like the shot overall. I like this one too. This is contrast. Again, and it could also be a couple of others. It could be, well, it's not so much simplicity, but it kind of is in the respect that, you've isolated your subjects without any distractions from the background or whatever. I really like that.
Yeah, I did crop it a little bit.
Yeah, I think this might be my favorite one of yours, actually. The exposure is awesome on it. It just kind of, I don't like peppers, but it kind of makes me want to dive in there, and especially the red ones. No, thank you. Food should not be painful.
I edited it. That sounds weird. But I upped the saturation and contrast and stuff to make it brighter because it just looked really dull.
Uh-huh.
So,
No, and it did. You nailed it. You got it right to where it should have been. The greens and the reds really work well with each other, so no problem there at all. Hang on a second. Okay. Let's move down to convergence. Yeah, again, not maybe the best example of it, but it does have it. You've got a leading line coming with your path, and then the trees sort of narrow as they go back. They do converge, both of them together at kind of the same point. Yeah, I can make a case for this. Again, it's not. Yeah, put somebody walking in a red outfit right in the middle of that, and I think you increase the dramatic impact a good bit. But overall, for what it is, it works. Now this one's kind of creepy. It's leading lines, and it is. But I think I like the mystery in this. It's almost like, the lights that are in the background are clearly, signs or street lights or cars or whatever, but it almost, to me, when I first look at it, looks like eyes, like wolves or something in the distance, and the way the lighting falls off, it's almost like, I'm not going down there, you go down there. That's kind of the feeling that I get from that, and I think that's kind of cool. I like that. And then, so this is a really good, a good example of rule of thirds. Okay, so you've got an original uncropped, looks like uncropped image.
No, I cropped it.
Did you crop it in? Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, you did a good job with it, because it's just like some of the portrait shots that we looked at last week for this element. It places his eyes right where they should be.
That's exactly what I did. Is I went in and made sure that like the right eye on the right side was at that point of impact.
Yeah, and like I said, the dominant eye, even though his eyes are closed, the dominant eye is always the closest one to the camera. So that worked out really well. Again, exposures may be a little under, but I think some of you are having issues because of working on uncalibrated screens, and that may have been the case for a lot of your images. These two are perfect as far as exposure is concerned. The rest of them are just a little bit on the dull side. But I really like what you did with that. Overall, this one to me is the one that I think sings. I would love that if it would just had a little more done to it, but as it sits right here, your peppers are the ones that kind of grab me right off the bat. All right, we got two more to go through here. Sierra's up next. Let's see where we're at here. All right, so we've got balance on this, which it kind of is. So I like the fact that you spend a little time here and put something together, including a background. I appreciate the effort on that. Poor Hannah, she's still trying to get back in. I like the fact that the elements that balance with each other are related. They're both, arts, art supply type things. Sarah, is that like what are the pens in the background sitting on?
It's just a little box that I have that I put a piece of paper over.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because it looks just like a piece of paper, and I'm like, how is it supporting those pens? All right, so that was just a curiosity thing. I think the only suggestion I would have made to you on that one would have been to use something to cover it that wasn't white, because it's a little bit of a large space to be that bright. But as far as the compositional element, yeah, you got it, no problem. This one I absolutely love. I think this is, and this is listed as contrast, but you could also make a case for this for being a weird type of convergence, the way this spirals down. We haven't talked about spirals and things like that, but they are also cool compositional elements. But as far as contrast goes, nailed it. Exposure is great. Strings laid out great. The cropping, everything about it. This is a really good shot. And I would have loved that one. I would have thought that would have been your best shot if it hadn't been for this one. This one is cool as hell. So I appreciate what you did, first of all, in arranging these pencils around the color wheel. Like they're not just, thrown in there any which way. They kind of progress around that color wheel. The heart coming off of the red pen on the bottom, genius. The placement of all the pens creates this perfect circle. These last two images, I think, are among the best two that we have this week. I really like both of those. Leading lines. So again, your exposure on this one is probably your biggest fail, is that it's just so dark and underexposed. I do like what you did. Again, your lines are leading sort of in a reverse direction than mostly what we see, but it still works. And I think I just would like to have seen, a little more brightness throughout the image overall. Rule of thirds, it definitely works for that. And wow, if you're going to, again, I talked about pets earlier and shooting, cats and especially with their eyes. Haven't seen too many where the eyes stand out better than this. There's just one issue with it. Do you know what it is?
Is it that like little light behind her?
Yeah, again, squint at the image and you can't help but see
Yeah.
that. So that just needs to, at some point, and you can't say, "Hey, kitty, hold there while I move." I understand that. So that's something would have to be taken out, later on. So for me, these two images are both awesome. I'm going to let you pick between the two because I like them both.
And I think I like the colored pencil one better.
Yes, that's what I was hoping you'd go for. Yeah, that was a really good one. That's, and I've seen this type of thing done many times with pencils and converging this way and using them as lines and all that kind of stuff. But I think that you did such a good job laying them out. And I think the addition of that heart in the center was a really good use of that space in the middle. So really good job. All right, Zach is up last. So balance, tell me what we're balancing here. This looks more like framing to me, actually.
Yeah, I was kind of similar to a lot of other people where I wasn't sure. I didn't really understand the balance concept super well, so I kind of just tried my best.
No problem. It is definitely one that tripped a lot of people up, I think. But I think, like I said, if you just keep in mind that we're talking about two individual elements that play off each other in some way, that'll probably help in the future.
Okay.
Let me roll down. Contrast definitely works for contrast. Even though the reds and the golds in the paper are in the same color family, we still have contrast. I like the whole design of the photograph. Like I love the way the scales, the music falls out of focus as it goes towards the top. I love the diagonal of the pen and the opposite diagonal of the of the music sheet coming down. I think this was done really well. Kind of reminds me, I don't know if you've seen the meme comparing a piece of sheet music from Beethoven to a piece of sheet music from Justin Bieber. Have you seen that one? Like the
No.
Beethoven one has got this, just got notes and stuff all over the place, and Bieber's like doot 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 doot, doot, you know?
Like chords, yeah, over and over. Yeah.
Just repetition. So and
No,
I'm not,
I wish that I took this picture a bit later, so I kind of had to rely on the light in my room more, which is a lot warmer. I do wish that like the white in the paper would have come out a bit more, but
I don't mind that, honestly, you know, and you could have, it's something you can correct later if you want, but honestly, I think warm sometimes has a more inviting feel, and yeah, that doesn't bother me at all. If I'd seen it both ways, I might have still actually preferred it this way. So this was, you know, for me, I think this was probably your strongest image overall. I do like your convergence one though as well. Again, it looks sort of like that psycho type of, you know, mental institution, which kind of is what college is, right?
have to feel like that. Yeah.
You know, where are you taking me kind of thing overall. And I love not the desolation, but the isolation of the shot. So all of that works on this one. I like that. The only minor complaint here is that little piece of a light up in the upper left-hand corner. Just a real slight crop on that. You might have had to come down as well as in, I'm not sure, but or just clone it out, which would have been real easy to do too. So interesting take on leading lines, using I don't know if that's like a scarf or something.
Yeah, it's a scarf.
Yeah, leading into the shoes. Normally, I wouldn't care for the busyness of the rug or the carpet that it's all on, but it's out of focus and you're at a low enough level that it's not a distraction. So I think, you know, not probably the most dynamic image that we've seen, but it works and it's kind of an interesting take on it. So I appreciate that. And then for rule of thirds, again, so you've got this little, whatever this little thing is. He's definitely on that right vertical line, but I think moving him up to hit the actual impact point between the top horizontal line and the right vertical line would have been a big plus. And I would have moved him up rather than down, because I think I would rather have seen more of the keyboard than what you've got in the background. And also, does that the keyboard, it looks to me like parts of it might light up, does it?
No, it's just it was like a super cheap non-weighted keyboard, like mechanical.
Well, that sucks. It would have been cool to have some, you know, some lights coming off of that thing or something, but yeah, if it doesn't, it doesn't. So yeah, you've got, yeah, you actually titled this rule of thirds and leading line because you recognize that it is both. Exposure again on both of these images is probably a little under, probably should come up a little bit. But these two are definitely, let me look at that. Yeah, these two are definitely your strongest one. Which of the two would you go with?
I like the pen one.
Yeah, I definitely do as well. All right, guys. So we are going to quickly go through and pick our winner here. And then we're going to take a quick break and come back and finish up with some new elements. All right, we got 12 items. Is that what we should have? Am I missing one? Yeah, I'm missing one. Who am I missing? Does anybody see their image missing? All right, then if it's not, then it's somebody who is not here. Let's see if I got that. Oh, you know what? That one's not in there because I don't think that was for this assignment. That's why it's not in there. Okay, so we're good. We're good with what we got. All right, so let's start with the upper left, the pink wall balance. And okay, then we'll go on to the mansion. The rule of thirds ceramic studio. pen in the music. Okay. Snowdopop. Justin Bieber leading lines. Contrast peppers. The elephant in the room. Convergence. Second convergence with the pens. Balance / symmetry. And leading lines with the Jordans. All right, so our winner is the Sierra. That's yours, right? The convergence one.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to throw out a couple extras here because I like both of the convergence ones. So that's going to get it, as well as I just got to do the peppers. I think you did a great job with what you did with those and all of that. And Bieber, he's got to get something because there's just something kind of fun about that one. All right, so we got actually 4 of you that are going to get a point this week. All right, so it's 5:26. I think we can go through the last part, I hope, fairly quickly, but we do need to take a little break here. Let's just do, can we do a quick one? Can we come back, say at 5:35, like 9 minutes from now? Give you time for a quick bathroom break. All right, we'll see you back at 9:35 then. Not 9:35, 5:35. So I'm looking over the points for the last few weeks, and Sierra, you're starting to take a commanding lead here. You guys got a little work to do to catch up to her. A couple of you are close. All right, so we're going to look at the next 5. There's actually 6, but we're going to combine them into 5 compositional elements. Let me show those to you. So the ones that we did before were the top 5 here. We're going to deal with the bottom 5. It's actually 6, but like I said, we'll combine use of diagonals, framing, perspective, which perspective and viewpoint are very, very similar, simplicity and symmetry. I'm just going to show you some examples of those and we'll go from there. So why you would want to use a diagonal. First of all, this is an example of an okay image, but to me, it splits it right in the middle. We've got that horizon line of bricks. They're just pretty much cutting it right off in the middle. And just by rotating the camera a little bit, we get this image, which creates this diagonal and makes the whole thing much more dynamic. So you're going to see a number of different ways of using diagonals. We don't want to use an element just for the sake of using an element. In other words, you don't want to just lay a ruler down on the table and photograph it at an angle and say, well, that's the use of diagonals. It really isn't. It has to be something that makes sense for the image. And if you look at this one again, that's a very static image, and this one's just a little more dynamic. So here's another example, and this could, a lot of these images could satisfy for more than one compositional element. We could be looking at viewpoint here or perspective again, because it's a very low angle. I think I was actually on the ground shooting this, but the diagonals that come down from those, the wood in the door that comes right to the model, that's a use of diagonals. That's using those things to point at where we want the viewer's eye to look, and even look at the latches, the large latches on either side of the door that are at diagonals and are pointing in a different direction right towards the center of that picture. This is one where we're actually using the model's torso to create a diagonal, leaning her on this old fender of this vehicle, going into a horizontal composition that allows her to come and cut through that image. And again, we've got contrast because the background is a little darker. It's very monochromatic. She obviously stands out from that because of contrast. Another use of diagonals and triangles. Don't forget that it's not just diagonals, it's triangles as well. So we've created triangles by using diagonals here between these guys, the bodies, the arms, and all of that kind of stuff. And if you have any questions or comments as we go through these, by all means, let me hear them. For framing, this is a little bit more of a simple one. It should be pretty easy to understand. We're using a frame of some sort in the foreground to frame something in the background. In this case, it's an interior window showing us the exterior world. In this case, you know, just a sort of an out of focus fence element in the foreground. I find it interesting that the flag is at half staff in this picture. I don't know why that is. Interesting. Didn't notice that until just now. Framing can be a little more subtle sometimes. A couple of these are very subtle. We're just framing from the upper portion of the image, not the entire image. I think this is, isn't that this the location where they shot some of the Temple of Doom stuff, like the Indiana Jones stuff looks like that. But anyway, the framing, you know, almost silhouettes it. The frame itself almost becomes a silhouette around the background. In this case, just using these pillars on the side of this balcony to frame a couple that is on the other balcony back here. So it just sort of creates a border on either side, left and right. In this case, it's not a top bottom left and right, it's just the left and right. So framing can be, doesn't have to be the entire border to be effective. It just normally is, I would say. And in this case, we've got all this darkness created by the bench for this craftsman, and he is in, you know, he's in the lighted portion in the center kind of doing his thing. So he's being framed by all this darkness around him. In this case, we have sort of a double frame because we've got the frame of the window with the background, which could be a framing shot in and of itself, but then we've got the girl in the foreground who's sort of being framed by that as well, even though she's a foreground item. So a couple of different takes on it as far as how it works. This one's a little more subtle, but again, she's being framed by the verticals on either side of her, the doorway of this bus. And also, you know, this was not, it was very intentional that, you know, there's this darkness and this void in this area that, you know, she's set off against, particularly her face and her hair against that darkness of the background. If I'd moved her forward a little bit, we would have lost the framing. We also would have, you know, intersected her with the bus and it wouldn't have, just wouldn't have stood out as much. Couple of other little examples, framing the background through kind of an unusual door in the foreground, framing a room by just using the doorway that leads into it, framing a subject by using a background frame, and it can be a foreground frame or a background frame. In this case, it's a background frame. Interesting color harmony with the dress and the areas in the background. This is a place. Anybody ever been to Randyland in Pittsburgh? It's a really funky place. If you ever get a chance, it's in, I think it's on the north side downtown. This guy has just created this incredible location on this corner lot of all these cool things to go in and photograph. And it's kind of a cool place. If you ever get a chance, it's worth going. Again, so using a background frame, the frame itself is out of focus. This is our mayor. And this is the building that he works in. It's where his office is behind him. So we just use that building to sort of create an arch over his head. Again, it's a partial frame, not a full frame. So when you're talking about perspective, again, perspective and viewpoint are very, very similar. They can involve high or low angles. They can involve just looking at something a little differently than what you normally do. And that's always a good thing when you can do that. In this case and in the next one, we're isolating the subject against the sky in the background to eliminate a lot of foreground distraction. Looking down on subjects. First of all, looking down on subjects can tend to make them look a little smaller, which is, you know, sometimes a good thing. But again, it minimizes distractions. We're not seeing anything that altar or anything behind there, which is actually kind of busy. It eliminates all of that. We do create some leading lines a little bit with the pews kind of leading into these guys. And also they're all posed very differently and not in a straight line. Not that that's important as far as viewpoint or perspective is concerned, but just something I wanted to point out. So I'll show you kind of a before and after. This is what normally you would see in a photograph like this. And then just changing the angle a little bit now becomes a little bit of a viewpoint or a perspective issue. Let me go back and show you again. So this is kind of straight on. This is kind of from a lower angle. This one has a little more drama, a little more impact to it. Also being the fact that we're not directly in front of her, but I've moved off to the side, it forces her to twist back to the camera, which creates another layer of interest. Some of these I really have had a fun time doing. I like shooting very low angle with very wide angle lenses, making sure I didn't, you know, cut off a part of that building. I wanted to see all of that, using the columns as kind of framing devices. So again, you know, we've got all kinds of things going on. We've got color harmony with the outfit and sort of the colors in the back of the building. Just a lot of little, anytime you throw in more than one thing, you're doing pretty well. I think this is at Randyland as well. Again, so when you talk about a viewpoint, just a way of looking at a subject that is different than you would normally see it, posed a little differently than you would normally see it. And the same thing here, again, ultra wide angle, and just, allowing that, what that type of a lens does to backgrounds. It shows a whole lot of this back here, elongates the arms, obviously, makes that kind of funky, but, and the effect there's a technique applied to this that probably should be backed off a little bit. It's not doing a great job on skin tones. Viewpoint perspective, again, almost always shooting from a low angle, but be very careful when you do that. When you're shooting from a low angle, make sure that you're not cutting off something that you want to see that's in the upper part. So you may have to tilt that camera a little bit higher than you think. If I'd come down and cut into that archway a little bit too much, I don't think I would have liked this anywhere near as well. So again, looking down, looking up, we get that perspective of the this tall window leaning in rather than stretching it out. In this case, I want it to lean in. I wouldn't flatten this out the way I did with the building earlier. I think this makes a lot more of a statement. And then again, just looking up, looking up or looking down, that's typically, a good thing. This picture was taken minutes before I was actually thrown out of the park. This is the Valley of Fire in Las Vegas. And it was immediately after 15 minutes of shooting seized upon by 2 park rangers who wanted to see my permit. And of course, I didn't know you needed a permit to shoot anything in the park. And I'm lucky they didn't confiscate my CF cards or my SD cards. They did let me get out of there, but didn't get to shoot much that day. For viewpoint, again, it's not always a high or low thing. It's just sometimes changing your angle to show something a little more interesting. So the image on the left is the picture that I took of this bride. And then I noticed the videographer kind of framing her and thought, well, let's mirror that. Let's create some balance a little bit between that, his viewfinder and her out of focus in the background. So it just creates a little bit more interest by including an element and literally just stepping to the right to get it. Simplicity, love simplicity. This is again, can be a lot of different things. This is about as simple as it gets. It's also rule of thirds because of where that bird is. It commands, as small as that bird and its shadow are, it commands attention because there's literally nothing else to look at in the photograph. Your eye has to go there. Same kind of thing here. There's so much similarity in this entire background that the only thing that's different is this horseback rider. And again, look where he is, right on that impact point of the rule of thirds. So a couple of things working there. So simplicity, but also viewpoint and perspective. So what is it about this image that was done really, really well? Anybody want to comment? Something that we've talked about a couple times today.
I mean, I think it could have been really easy to make it not symmetrical, like with all the square, the tiles, it would be easy to see if it was tilted one way or the other.
Yeah, that's exactly it. If you look at those all the way around, those things are spot on perfect on all 4 corners. And my guess is that was probably skewed a little bit in post because, I mean, I guess it's possible that this person is actually, this isn't one of mine, but that they were actually leaning out over something to get that straight down on perspective. But man, that would have been tough to do. And I think the really cool thing is that little half circle of black up above that adds a little something. Now, if she had been on the right side of that, or if that had been on the right side and leaving her where she is, now we would have had balance as well. It's the 2 dark objects in the image would have balanced against each other. So moving on with simplicity, sometimes it's just, focusing in and eliminating background details and keeping things in really tight. There was a lot going on in this background. So, the best case scenario was to just move it in and eliminate all of that. Same thing here. This background is very plain. I really like that. I love the contrast of his dark suit against the wood grain, the red tie standing out against that. A lot of contrast going on here. We've got a little bit of rule of thirds with where he is. Great lighting on him. This was a great location to shoot in, but overall, it's just a very simple image, and I like it for that. You could say this is leading lines. It is, but it's also very simple because it's very monochromatic. Again, squint at it, and if you eliminate the border around the image itself, you go right to his skin tone. That's the brightest spot in the image, and that's what stands out. In this case, it's the opposite. When you squint, her skin tone is the darkest thing in the image. So your eye is always going to go to the area of greatest contrast. Whether that's a dark area or a light area, it doesn't matter. It's just based on what the rest of the image is. So this is very simple, very airy and light, but it works. Now let's look at symmetry. So symmetry can be a few different things as well. In this case, it doesn't have to be perfect symmetry. Notice the trash can in the lower right-hand corner that there isn't one in the left. Notice the flower boxes in the windows that don't match exactly, but it's still a very symmetrical image. And what you should notice is how perfect the verticals and the horizontals are. They're very straight. For symmetry to work, that has to be there. Same thing here. This is, you know, we don't have perfect straightness here in the brick. It could have probably been stretched a little bit to bring that in, but still has a very, very symmetrical look overall. Leading lines, convergence, symmetry, you name it. It's not perfectly symmetrical again because the building on the right doesn't match on the left, but our center subject, our object in the middle, is very symmetrical. Same thing here, left and right, pretty much in perfect symmetry. Probably a very long shutter speed on this because the water has been allowed to move, which creates a little interest in that reflection. Now here's an example of having your horizon line dead center in the middle of the frame and having it work because we're doing symmetry. And the reflection of that mountain in the bottom matches the one on the top, other than being a little darker. And this wouldn't work anywhere nearly as well if that horizon line is not dead center like that. Another really cool, again, leading lines and symmetry. I think this is in Bali. This is third on my bucket list to get to one of these places soon. But this just creates this inviting, you know, warm environment that you just want to get down that thing and get to. And then finally, this could be considered symmetry, could be considered balance. But again, it could be even framing a little bit because she's framed by these two windows. So you don't have to have a hard, fast, it definitely is this or it definitely is that, as long as it kind of, you know, toys with a lot of those different compositional elements. All right, I'm going to take that presentation that you just saw, and I'm going to create a PDF of it and place it in the resources folder so you can look back through the examples without having to watch this whole thing again. And the other thing that will be in there is, let me show you this. So there are going to be these three, I've already uploaded these three little single page cards, one on diagonal lines, one on framing, and one on symmetry and balance. It might give you a couple of additional examples of how those things work. So I'll put, those three are already in there. I've actually kind of changed the resources folder around a little bit and created a subfolder called composition, and all of the compositional related things are in there. And I will also, like I said, as soon as I'm done here, I'll create a PDF of that part of the presentation, so you can just kind of look through those examples again and see what's what. So let me ask you, as you look through those, are there any of them that confuse you a little bit the way balance seemed to have last week? Were there any that you were like, not quite sure I know what that one is? Anything? These are a little bit easier to understand overall, but I think the biggest difference is the similarity between viewpoint and perspective. And so I'll accept either one, even though there are 6 topics there, we really only need 5 images. you know, because those two really are sort of interchangeable and you can use them any way you like. Any questions on any of that? Seeing lots of head shake no. A lot of people looking at the clock going, hey, if I say no, we're out of here a half hour early. I got you. I feel you. No problem. Yeah, I think this was a pretty straightforward walkthrough, so I don't think we need to belabor it anymore. I'll give you all the tools that you need to figure those out. Just remember to name your files with what they are, so I have some idea what we're dealing with. Gotcha. All right, guys, that's it for this week. We'll see you next Tuesday.